With me is Jonathan Portis, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at the School of Politics and Economics at King's College London, Senior Fellow of the Research Group UK in a Changing Europe. Jonathan, thanks very much for coming into the studio. I mean, UK in a Changing Europe has been kind of going through in a granular way all the detail of this. And as Chris was saying there is an element of politics which can always open up a negotiation or reopen a negotiation. But presumably all this talk about WTO rules makes it that much more complicated because it's not just the EU, it's all those other countries we trade with.
That's right. So if we leave with no deal, we are obliged to apply the same tariffs to EU goods as on non-EU goods. That means that we would have to apply tariffs on quite a range of goods, but more particularly and most importantly, most of this is out of our hands. The EU would have to apply the same tariffs on our goods that the EU currently applies on, for example, US or Chinese goods with countries with which they don't have a free trade agreement. And so that is going to be a pretty big deal for the UK exporters.
Presumably for them that would be an even bigger sacrifice because it wouldn't just be about doing a deal with us and getting that finally finished and the future trading relationship. It presumably, once you've taken away those tariffs, you can't, on American goods, for example, you can't reintroduce them or you're into a kind of trade war.
It's very difficult. So I think when the EU says, and the EU has been completely consistent on them, they haven't said this GATT24 thing is not going to happen in the event of no deal. The EU has been completely consistent all along saying, look, if there is no deal, the UK will be treated like a third country because that is what the UK will be after a no deal. It'll be a third country like the US or China. Doesn't mean that we won't still be able to export to the EU, but it does mean that we will not be able to export as we are now. Car manufacturers' supply chains will not work. We will face, our farmers will face very large tariffs and quotas in exporting their products to the EU and so on. So it doesn't necessarily mean catastrophe. We're careful to say that some of the more apocalyptic predictions have been overstated. The idea that this is going to be smooth sailing, there isn't going to be quite considerable disruption, that's not serious.
I mean, there have been some quiet moves going on, haven't there, in Brussels, for example, the agreement between the UK and the EU on allowing flights to continue, and they won't be grounded on, midnight on the 31st of October, assuming there is a no deal. But there are quite a lot of other areas that would be unresolved.
Yes, that's right. And remember, those aren't really agreements. Those are unilateral measures taken by the EU for a short period of time, 6 months, 12 months, so that, as you say, things like flights can continue to happen, so British truckers continue to drive in Europe, and so on. But I think we have to remember the EU can turn those mitigation measures, because they are unilateral, can turn them off at any time. So, for example, if you think that we're going to leave with no deal, not pay the 39 billion that's in the withdrawal agreement, and the EU is just going to meekly say, oh, well, we're just going to keep these things going in place forever, I don't think that's politically realistic.
So again, it becomes part of any negotiation, effectively, this, and in a sense, all the cards are in their hand, potentially in those circumstances.
That's right. I mean, I think whatever you think of no deal, the idea that this, as Mr. Johnson sometimes to imply, gets Brexit done and dusted, it's over, we can put it behind us and get on with the rest of our lives, that is just fantasy. No deal here would just be another staging post to another round of very tortuous negotiations where, as you say, both sides would be, I think, fairly embittered. Our negotiation position would probably be weaker. Perhaps more important, though, would be the atmosphere on both sides would be pretty nasty.
Professor Jonathan Portis, thank you very much.